Hi, and today for this intervention, I decided that it would be more fun to talk about something very D&D related rather than doing a little side quest that we've been doing. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is playing D&D for free. And if you are interested in D&D, you know that you need a copy of the rules, you need all this pieces and parts of the information, and the sad thing that happens to people is that they see the entry cost with regard to the books. Now, any tabletop role-playing game has some components to it, but many of them are free. And equally of excitement and interest to folks is that much of Dungeons and Dragons, as shared by Wizards of the Coast, is actually free as long as you approach it correctly. There are many of the books, and I own a ton of them. I own all of them, I think, that are not for free with Dungeons and Dragons, but I have definitely been diving into a lot of different tabletop role-playing games, and there's just so many that offer pay-as-you-can or free versions. So if you're just starting off, you're a young person, and you're interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons, this little interlude is just for you. So I find that tabletop role-playing games are resurging right now, and you can see us playing D&D. We play it in our own special way with our own unique little additions and subtractions and tinkerings. And while we have the full set of everything and we use the full access of D&D Beyond, you can actually use these resources to play and host your own game. Even though the free resources are somewhat limited in scope, it's more than enough to get started and to see where you want to go with the game. Now, when I say free, certain aspects of this may not be free because of the additional components required to get access. And I'm not able to address the accessibility issue, but if you have a local library, hopefully you have some access through them to a computer. If you are looking for materials like graph paper or other things like that, I'm hoping that you can get in touch with folks who can share those things, or you can scale things down and kind of miniaturize your gaming sessions if you do need different props. So while I can't resolve, access to paper that can print a character sheet out, I can at least help you get to the accessibility of the materials with this little talk. So you can really run a great campaign from level 1 to level 20 with just what's available freely. As far as the rule sets go, free and legal, you can get the 5th edition basic rules from Wizards of the Coast. It is just a link. In fact, I'm going to start screen sharing right now and get you access and talk about where you can get access to all of those pieces. So really quickly, let me first shrink my face so I'm not hogging the whole screen real estate. And let's dive into this. So I'm going to poke myself up over here, and let's see how big I made my side camera for the other screen. Oh, that's beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and tuck this down over here a little bit and give us a little bit more room on the side screen. Okay. So we're looking here at D&D Beyond, but if you go to, and we're going to put this in the show notes for today, dnd.wizards.com/whatisdnd/basic-rules. I'm going to have to make sure that's typed out because there were some dashes there that I skipped over. Apologies for those of you who are listening to the podcast, but in the description for the show notes, the link will also be there. The basic rules for D&D is a PDF, and it's pretty well laid out on their webpage about what you need to do. 4 steps to pull things together, what sections and information you might need to use, and the D&D Basic Rules PDF, which I'm going to click on right now, is a beautiful, beautiful resource. It is quite long, and that is actually where we get to one of the problems that may occur, is that a lot of the material and information that I'm going to share with you is robust. And sometimes robustness isn't helpful. So what we do instead is we kind of utilize some additional tools that help us have greater access. And there's another reason why I like to go to some other tools is because the basic rules only allow 4 character classes and also 4 playable races. And then there's just a handful of spells and weapons, but if you want to have more options and you can't afford the books, Wizards made the system reference document. You might hear it called SRD for short. It's an open source compendium of the intellectual third property, so that parties, us, can freely use and create new D&D content. And I absolutely love this. This is actually what first drove me into the game, is the idea that I could create my own versions of things and be very creative with playing tabletop role-playing games. The official version is on the Wizards of the Coast site, and it's in a PDF, so you can just grab that and you can. It's kind of heavy on the intellectual property components, and the instructions for beginning DMs is just pretty much absent from the system reference document. You can still get a lot from the what I keep calling the OGL in my head, and I probably need to keep saying the regular basic rules document. You can definitely get a lot of information from that. Now, that is something you can print out and have in hard copy, like say you don't have access to a computer at all times. Print those out, have them in hard copy, and reference them and kind of build up your campaign and your ideas and your dreams for what you want to do. There are, however, some digital tools. I think they all have similar naming conventions, like dnd5e.info, 5thsrd.org, and my favorite one, which I'm going to talk about with you right now, which is the 5esrd.com. And they have these SRD topics or the rules, definitions, and everything set up in a way that you can click and find things. So you can see here already that there's a lot more races. There are advertisements, which is so fun. But you can see already there's a lot more races and class options in this space, which I find very helpful and convenient. There's also a lot more of the various whatchamacallums. There's a lot more of the classes available, feats, everything is here. And it includes both things that are some of the official things, but it also includes things that were made by other folks. In fact, if you read on the top line and about the site, it says what the intent of this site and all sites that make up the Open Gaming Network is to bring you official open game content rules for 5th edition and the best open game content from other publishers, not intended to only official content, yada yada. So basically, like, a lot of things are here. On that topic, you can also poke into a couple places like the Dungeon Masters Guild and Drive Through RPG. They may just be linked sites at this point. I'm not honestly sure anymore. But they have a place for creative DMs to just publish and share their own homebrew adventures and supplements, which is just really amazing because a lot of the creators price their items at free or pay what you can. So it's a great little place to get into some more specific information. Now, before I run away from 5ESRD, the reason why I love this is because when I was getting into this again as an adult, I relied on this for my initial naval adventuring guide. It also has a lot of information around like the hyper-tech sort of worlds that you might be creating, which is not part of the kind of the basic for free D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond. Saying D&D Beyond is kind of an accidental segue, but when you're trying to run the game, you can print out and have that, like, for me, it's the 1995 version of playing the game, where I actually had a paper player sheet, and we were using bottle caps and coins as little icons on a big, huge mat that I think we had drawn out with rulers to create our own grid system, and we just kind of scribbled all over the place. It was all pencil, so we were constantly erasing it. It looked terrible, but it was a great way for us to play out our games. So you can do it with just a pencil and ruler and a bit of imagination, and it's really fun. Although we got into a lot of arguments because we didn't have precision tools. Didn't really matter. We still had an enjoyable time, and we kept playing because it was mostly about the social time with each other as a bunch of teenagers. So, like, yes, in the Dreamland, you have the hand painted maps and minis, and they're just gorgeous and beautiful. But in living on a shoestring or budget gaming, you don't need those things. As we've been playing the game for you all on our podcast and Probability of Demise, we've been doing Theater of the Mind. And I actually find a lot of joy in Theater of the Mind because you can let go of things like, oh, I have 30 feet of movement. I can say, ooh, they're just out of reach. But if you hustle, you could probably get over there, and then the player can think, okay, I can use either my dash, if I have access to that, or I can use my action for that movement. And they can plot out their ideas and what they want to do, which I think is like 90% of the fun. And it frees you up from a lot of the constraints, and it lets everybody kind of live in their own head play space, which I feel like is just very fun. But that said, one of the things you can't really get without purchasing is dice. Except you can if you have one of those digital tools like a cell phone um, or a computer, because there are all these free dice rollers, and you can put in the dice that you're going to be using, and you can roll them. I'm just on Google. If you just Google Dice Roller, they have a tool for this, and you can just roll the dice. Let's see if we get something better than a 6 this time. Well, that's okay. And this is a fun way to get access um, to the dice if you can't afford them. Now, I will say that dice are very, very affordable these days. There's, if you go into a little gaming store, you can get some very affordable ones, and I think I'm going to figure out how to set up a dice gifting plan. I think that would be a fun thing for Probability of Demise to do, and we'll have to talk about that. Dreamland, I'm dreaming about gifting young people dice and games. At any rate, another thing that you can have access to is D&D Beyond kind of pushed Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons into the digital age, and you can use a free account to create your characters and use those basic rules, those free rules, to create those characters. There's a lot packed into that, and so you just come in here and set up for a free site. Now, if you're a young person and you don't have email, or you're not supposed to technically be signing up for these types of things, that can present a barrier. Again, go back to the basic rules, print out those sheets, and use those. Or you can do this and just don't tell me about it because I want you to be legal. And this makes a really nice place to get started, especially if you're uncomfortable or confused about the math used to create those and generate those character sheets, which might become a thing that we do. Maybe one of our next intermissions will actually be rolling a character one-on-ones. But I really do enjoy that this is available now. Other tools that are available are Roll20 for some virtual maps if you do have access to digital tools, and a few other things. They all have levels of access, and the free level grants you very basic but usable access to play these games either in person or virtually. So just something to consider, all these fun little doodads and additional things that are out there and can help make it a better experience for yourself. Now, there are some other tools out there, and I'm going to go ahead and close off my little side screen here because the other tools that I'm going to talk about, I don't really want to pull up because I don't honestly know how long they will all last, because D&D Beyond has taken up a little bit of the airspace with regard to the digital tool sets. Before D&D Beyond created and unveiled their encounter builder, which I think is still in beta or alpha, but is fairly functional, and I do use that. Cobalt Fight Club was a really useful tool, and it still is a useful tool. I still go to them because sometimes I feel like the encounter generator or the encounter builder with D&D Beyond is not correct. But you go to Cobalt Fight Club, which is a very useful tool for balancing difficulty against a party's strength. And if you are just using the rules the basic rules to figure out how to beat a DM and properly give them an encounter experience, it can be very difficult to explore how those different components work. I mean, there's information on how to do it in the basic rules, but it is a complicated thing for a beginning DM. So it's nice to have a little bit of an assist. There's also Home Brewery, and that lets you, it really walks you through creating your own homebrew magic items, spells, and it has some really pretty PDF formats that kind of make it look official, so you can print those off and hand those to your players to make it look really good. And then the other one that I really enjoy that's a free content site is Donjon, and Donjon makes me happy because I just lose name ideas or loot drop combinations and shops for these random encounters that my players go into. If I've really plotted out a million things and everybody just goes in a totally different direction, I need that ability to quickly come up with something on the spot. And sometimes you have the game master, dungeon master equivalent of writer's block because they just did something. You're like, I don't have a name for this. I need to come up with a name now. And so Donjon is a really useful little website for that. And then one of my favorite things about this community is that there are some components of it where there's disrespect, but there's also a lot of people out there looking out for you, looking out for each other, and trying to help you feel included in the game. If you go to Sage Advice or Giant in the Playground and Reddit, you can find great resources for clarification on rules. As watchers of this channel, you've probably seen that I'm a little less rule-bound than story-bound, and I also suggest that if you have a story that you're going from, it's okay to muck up the rules, especially if you've talked about it beforehand with your group and said, like, look, I'm not going to stick to the rules when the story is more interesting. So if there's a situation where the rules are in conflict with something really amazing happening, I'm probably going to go with amazing. I've had different people label that different ways, but I just feel like it's the idea of story first. You're together with your friends, you should have a fun story rather than letting the rules ruin your fun. Make sure the rules are privileging your fun and doing the things that you want them to do for you. That said, there's a ton of other ways to get on this hobby and enjoying yourself. I absolutely love painting minis, so the idea that I might give that up to go totally without the props and is just something that I kind of laugh about to myself because I have adult money and I do adult money things. But if you don't have adult money or you're trying to be really careful with your stuff, just do the free stuff. It's just as much fun. The storytelling is just as much of a blast. I may have tangentially related hobbies that mean that I'm willing to spend a little bit more money here, but you can do it all for free if you would really like to. So grab a couple of friends, maybe go to a local gaming store and just start playing with the open-ended stuff, or the local library, wherever you're at. Just go somewhere and play, or stay home and play with your friends. You can also, if you're not interested in this particular game, D&D is not for everyone. There's a ton of other games out there. So feel free to explore those things. I definitely can recommend a few, so I'll really quickly do that as I wrap up this quickie talk. The first one that I want to recommend is kind of the matchy-matchy thing going on here. Pathfinder. Pathfinder is just a ton of fun, and I really enjoyed that gaming system. It's a little bit more focused on combat tactics and strategy, which is not for me. I don't enjoy that as much. Also, kind of switching headsets from like the fantasy world, although you can create a science fiction space using D&D and Pathfinder setting rules, just tweaking them a little bit, and there's definitely source books that help you do that. But you can also just dive into Cyberpunk 2077, I think is what it's called. I don't remember exactly what the game system is fully called, but I actually steal some components from the Cyberpunk system when I'm running my game because they just make more sense with regard to playing the different games, just different, not games, different scenarios. And I really like how Cyberpunk handles a few of those things. Traveler is another sci-fi one. It's very future-oriented, lots of high-tech dealios. I haven't played it in forever, so I cannot remember how it works. And then if you kind of want like that merger in between, Shadowrun and Starfinder. Like Starfinder is just Pathfinder in space, really, I think. At least that's how I've interpreted it. Whereas like Shadowrun is kind of the magic cyberpunk future. And I really considered for our podcast using that system. But I wasn't really ready. Now there are some free or open licensed or licensed things for like if you just want to live out your life in the Star Trek universe or Star Wars universe, and those are definitely worth doing. I also think that there's one for Firefly, and I want to go play that at some point. If you're into horror, bumps in the night kind of stuff, there is the Call of Cthulhu. I'm not a fan. I do not go into that. There's also the End of the World, and I can't do the scary stuff. It's just not my thing. Now, in terms of apocalypse things, there's Apocalypse Worlds, and there's Fate. Fate is very similar to Apocalypse, so I don't really know how those are differed. Just know that there's those two different choices with regards to that. And then there's a lot of new tabletop RPGs that have come out recently. I've got a couple on my shelf that I'm hoping to play sometime soon. I just haven't played them well enough to, or enough just to even have a conversation about like, should we play this or not? I did play Kids on Broomsticks and Kids on Bikes. I love both of those. Playing with kids, I would like to play with adults because kids are hilarious, but they're also chasing every rabbit in sight, and I don't mean that metaphorically. They chase rabbits. So it just be really fun to play with that with adults, so I could see what it might be like with a different group. But yeah, these are a ton of fun. I really hope you are enjoying our show, and I hope that this little conversation maybe gives you some space to try and create your own worlds with your friends.